The police cruiser pulled up in front of my house at exactly 3:15 on a Tuesday afternoon, and I knew immediately that Deborah Thornton from the HOA had made good on her threat to call law enforcement because I refused to share my private swimming pool with her entitled family. I had moved into the Sunset Meadows community in Scottsdale, Arizona, 6 months earlier, attracted by the reasonable HOA fees and the promise of a quiet suburban life. My name is Zachary Daniels, and I work as a senior health inspector for Maricopa County, a job that requires attention to detail, an understanding of regulations, and unfortunately, dealing with difficult people on a regular basis. Little did I know that my professional expertise would become the key factor in one of the most absurd neighborhood disputes I had ever experienced. The whole situation had started innocently enough 3 weeks ago. I had just finished installing a beautiful saltwater pool in my backyard, complete with proper permits, inspections, and all the required safety features. The pool was entirely within my property lines, paid for with my own money, and maintained according to my own preferences. I had specifically chosen a home with a large lot to have privacy and space for exactly this kind of personal amenity. Deborah lived 4 houses down from me in a slightly smaller home with her husband Gerald and their 3 teenage children. She was the vice president of the Sunset Meadows HOA, a position she wielded like a scepter over the kingdom she imagined herself ruling. At 52 years old, with her trademark blonde bob haircut that never seemed to move regardless of wind conditions, and her collection of pastel pantsuits, Deborah embodied every stereotype of the suburban HOA enforcer. She drove a white Lexus SUV with a bumper sticker that read, "I speak to managers professionally," which she apparently thought was humorous rather than self-aware. The first encounter happened when I was testing the pool chemistry on a Saturday morning. Deborah had appeared at my back fence, which bordered the common walking path that ran through the neighborhood. She stood there with her hands on her hips, watching me work with an expression that suggested I was doing something vaguely offensive by existing in my own backyard. "That is a lovely pool," she had called out. Her voice carrying that particular tone that indicated a compliment was actually a preamble to a demand. "You know, the community would really benefit from having access to a private pool. The HOA common area only has that small splash pad, and it gets so crowded in the summer." I had looked up from my test kit, already sensing where this conversation was headed. "Thank you. Yes, I am planning to enjoy it quite a bit this summer." "Well, I was thinking," Deborah continued, not taking the hint, "that since you are a single man living alone, you could not possibly use all that pool space yourself. It would be wonderful if you could open it up for community use, maybe on weekends." "My children would absolutely love it, and I am sure other families would too." I had stood up, wiping my hands on a towel. "I appreciate the interest, Deborah, but this is my private pool. I am not comfortable opening it to the neighborhood. There are liability issues, maintenance costs, and honestly, I built it for my own private use." Her smile had tightened into something that resembled a crack in porcelain. "I see. That seems rather selfish, do not you think? We are a community here at Sunset Meadows. We share and care for each other." "Sharing and caring is great for common areas," I had replied, keeping my voice level and professional. "But my backyard and pool are not common areas. They are my private property. I am sure you understand the distinction." That had been the beginning of what would become an escalating campaign of harassment. Over the following 2 weeks, Deborah had tried multiple approaches. First came the friendly persistence, with her stopping by my house 3 more times with increasingly elaborate arguments about why I should share my pool. She brought pamphlets about community building, statistics about neighborhood property values increasing with amenities, and even a petition that she claimed had been signed by concerned residents requesting pool access. When I continued to politely but firmly refuse, she shifted tactics. Suddenly, I started receiving violation notices from the HOA. My grass was allegedly a quarter-inch too long, despite being perfectly maintained. My garbage cans were supposedly visible from the street, even though they were in the same location they had been since I moved in, tucked discreetly beside my garage. My mailbox was cited for having a small scratch in the paint that required immediate attention. Each violation came with a letter on official HOA stationery, signed by Deborah in her capacity as vice president. I had dealt with each notice methodically, documenting everything with photographs and written responses. My professional background had taught me the importance of maintaining detailed records when dealing with unreasonable officials. I measured my grass, photographed my garbage can placement from multiple street angles, and even had my mailbox professionally inspected and repainted, despite the scratch being barely visible. But Deborah was not finished. The third week had brought a new level of absurdity. She had called an emergency HOA board meeting and proposed a new rule that any homeowner with a private pool must make it available for community use at least 2 days per week, with the HOA managing the schedule and access. The proposal was thinly veiled as a community enrichment initiative, but everyone at the meeting knew it was directed specifically at me. I had attended that meeting, armed with copies of the original HOA bylaws, state property laws, and legal precedents regarding private property rights. When my turn came to speak, I calmly explained that such a rule would be legally unenforceable, would expose both homeowners and the HOA to massive liability issues, and would effectively constitute a partial seizure of private property without compensation. Furthermore, I had added, looking directly at Deborah, any attempt to enforce such a rule would result in immediate legal action for property rights violations. I have consulted with a real estate attorney, and I am fully prepared to defend my rights as a homeowner. The HOA president, a reasonable man named Michael Chen who worked in accounting, had quickly tabled the proposal, stating that it required further legal review. Deborah had been furious, her face turning red as she argued that the community good should outweigh individual selfishness. The meeting had ended with no action taken, but I knew this was far from over. That had been 3 days ago. This morning, I had been relaxing by my pool, enjoying my day off, when Deborah appeared at my fence again. This time, her 3 teenagers were with her, all in swimsuits and carrying pool toys. "Zachary," she had called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "We are just going to come use your pool for a bit. I am sure you will not mind. It is such a hot day, and the children are just dying for a swim." I had stood up from my lounge chair, keeping my voice calm but firm. "Deborah, I have told you repeatedly that this is my private pool. Your family is not welcome to use it without my permission, and I am not giving that permission." "Oh, do not be ridiculous," she had said, already moving toward my back gate. "You cannot possibly need this entire pool to yourself. We will just be an hour or so." I had quickly moved to block the gate. "Deborah, you need to leave. This is trespassing. If you attempt to enter my property without permission, I will call the police." "Trespassing," she had laughed, a harsh sound that held no humor. "This is a community. You do not own the whole neighborhood, Zachary. My children have every right to enjoy the amenities here." "They have the right to enjoy the common area amenities," I had corrected. "Not my private property. Please leave now." Her expression had transformed from fake friendliness to genuine anger. "You know what? I am calling the police. You are harassing me and preventing my family from enjoying community resources. I am the HOA vice president, and I will not tolerate this behavior. Please do call the police," I had responded. "I would love to have them explain trespassing laws to you." She had pulled out her phone right there and dialed. I listened as she told the 911 dispatcher that she was being threatened and harassed by a neighbor who was preventing her from accessing community property. She made it sound like I was some kind of dangerous criminal holding her hostage. When she hung up, she had that triumphant look that certain people get when they believe they have won. "They will be here in minutes," she had announced, "and then we will see who is in the wrong." "I will be waiting," I had said, returning to my lounge chair with my phone in hand, ready to record the interaction, which brought me back to the present moment, watching two Scottsdale police officers get out of their cruiser and walk toward my front door. I met them there before they could knock, stepping out onto my porch with my identification already in hand. "Good afternoon, officers," I said calmly. "I assume you are here about a complaint from Deborah Thornton." The first officer, whose name tag read Martinez, nodded. "We received a call about a dispute over pool access. The caller said she was being harassed and threatened." "I see," I replied. "The situation is actually quite different. Miss Thornton has been attempting to trespass on my property to use my private pool without permission. When I refused her access and informed her that attempting to enter would constitute trespassing, she became angry and called you. I have not threatened or harassed anyone. I have simply defended my property rights." The second officer, Officer Kim, pulled out a notepad. "Can you walk us through what happened today?" I gave them a clear, factual account of the encounter, including the context of the previous weeks of harassment. I showed them the violation notices I had received, the documentation of my responses, and the photos I had taken of Deborah and her family at my back fence earlier. I also mentioned my profession, which immediately changed the tone of the conversation. "You are a health inspector?" Officer Martinez asked with interest. "For the county, senior inspector, yes," I confirmed. "I have worked in public health and safety for 12 years. I am very familiar with regulations, documentation, and proper procedures." Officer Kim exchanged a glance with his partner. "That is interesting. Where is Miss Thornton now?" "She should be at the back fence near the walking path," I said. "Would you like me to show you? They followed me through my house to the back door." Sure enough, Deborah was still there, now seated on one of the benches along the path with her family around her, apparently waiting for the police to arrive and vindicate her. When she saw us coming, she jumped up with an expression of relief and righteous anger. "Officers, thank goodness," she exclaimed, rushing toward my fence. "This man has been absolutely unreasonable. He is preventing community members from accessing this pool, which should be available for everyone's use. He has threatened me and created a hostile environment in our neighborhood." Officer Martinez held up a hand. "Madam, let me stop you right there. This is Mr. Daniels' private property, correct? His personal pool that he built on his own land." Deborah hesitated, clearly not liking where this was going. "Well, yes, technically, but in a community like ours, we share resources. The HOA has been trying to arrange for reasonable access. The HOA has no legal authority to require a homeowner to share private property," Officer Kim stated flatly. "Mr. Daniels is well within his rights to deny access to his pool. But he threatened to call the police on me," Deborah protested. "That is harassment." "No, madam," Officer Martinez corrected. "Informing someone that you will call the police if they trespass is not harassment." It is a factual statement about consequences. You, however, did actually attempt to enter his property without permission, which is the definition of trespassing. You also filed a false police report by claiming you were being threatened and harassed when you were actually being told you could not trespass. I watched the color drain from Deborah's face. I did not file a false report. I was being harassed. Being told no is not harassment, Officer Kim said. Now, I am going to give you a warning this time, but if we are called back here for another dispute about this pool, there will be charges filed. Do you understand? Deborah's mouth opened and closed several times. You are taking his side. I am the vice president of the HOA. I was trying to do something nice for the community. Madam, your position in the HOA does not give you authority over private property, Officer Martinez said firmly. Please move along and do not attempt to access Mr. Daniels' pool again without explicit permission. Gerald, Deborah's husband, who had been silent until now, finally spoke up. Come on, Deb, let us just go home. He looked embarrassed, and I almost felt sorry for him. Deborah shot me a look of pure venom before turning and stalking away, her family trailing behind her. The teenagers looked disappointed and confused, probably not fully understanding the adult drama that had unfolded. After they left, Officer Martinez turned to me. I apologize that you had to deal with this, Mr. Daniels. Some people really do not understand boundaries. If she continues to harass you, please document everything and call us. You may eventually need a restraining order. I hope it does not come to that, I said, though I was not particularly optimistic. But thank you for clarifying the situation. After the officers left, I tried to enjoy the rest of my afternoon, but the encounter had soured my mood. I found myself constantly glancing at the back fence, half expecting Deborah to reappear with some new strategy. The next few days were blissfully quiet, and I started to hope that maybe the police intervention had finally ended the situation. I should have known better. The following Monday, I was at work conducting routine inspections of food service establishments throughout the county. My job involved checking restaurants, cafes, food trucks, and any other businesses that served food to the public. I examined food storage practices, employee hygiene protocols, equipment maintenance, and overall cleanliness. When establishments failed to meet health codes, I had the authority to issue citations, mandate corrections, or in severe cases, shut them down temporarily until violations were corrected. Around 2 in the afternoon, I pulled up to my next scheduled inspection at a small cafe called Deborah's Delights in North Scottsdale. The name made me pause, but it was a common enough name. Surely it could not be the same Deborah. The coincidence would be too absurd, except it absolutely was. I walked into the cafe, a bright, cheerfully decorated space with floral wallpaper and white wicker furniture. And there, behind the counter, stood Deborah Thornton, wearing a pink apron and looking up with a customer service smile that froze on her face the instant she recognized me. You, she breathed, the word coming out like an accusation. I maintained my professional composure, pulling out my inspection credentials. Miss Thornton, I am here to conduct the routine health and safety inspection scheduled for today. This is Deborah's Delights, correct? Registered owner Deborah Thornton. She stared at me with mounting horror. You cannot inspect my cafe. This is harassment. You are targeting me because of our dispute. I am conducting a routine inspection that was scheduled 3 months ago, long before we ever met, I said calmly, showing her the paperwork with the appointment date. This is my assigned route, and your establishment is due for its semi-annual inspection. If you refuse to allow me to conduct the inspection, I will have to note that and escalate the matter, which would result in a mandatory closure until inspection is completed. A customer sitting at one of the tables looked up with interest, clearly sensing drama. Deborah noticed and quickly lowered her voice. "Fine. Do your inspection. You will not find anything wrong. I run a very clean establishment." "I am sure you do," I replied neutrally. "Shall we begin?" I started with the dining area, checking table cleanliness, proper sanitizer availability, and general maintenance. Everything in the front of the house was acceptable, though I noted a few minor issues like a slightly sticky menu and a wobbling chair leg. The real inspection, however, happened in the back of the house. The moment I stepped into the kitchen, my professional instincts went on high alert. The first thing I noticed was the temperature. It was too warm, suggesting possible issues with the refrigeration or air conditioning. I checked the refrigerator thermometers and confirmed my suspicion. The main refrigerator was running at 46 degrees Fahrenheit, well above the required maximum of 41 degrees. "Your refrigerator is not maintaining proper temperature," I informed Deborah, who had followed me into the kitchen. "This is a critical violation. Potentially hazardous food stored above 41 degrees can develop dangerous bacterial growth." "It was working fine this morning," she protested. "The thermometer must be wrong." I pulled out my own calibrated thermometer and verified the temperature. "It is correct. When was the last time your refrigeration equipment was serviced?" She hesitated. "I do not know. A few months ago, maybe." I made a note and continued my inspection. The violations piled up. There was no proper hand-washing log, indicating employees might not be following required hand hygiene protocols. The 3-compartment sink was being used for storage rather than dish sanitizing. Several containers of food were not properly dated or labeled. The cutting boards showed deep scoring that could harbor bacteria. The floor behind the cooking line had not been properly cleaned, with visible grease buildup. But the most serious violation I found was in the dry storage area. There, on a bottom shelf, sat several large containers of prepared chicken salad, unlabeled and clearly past safe storage times. When I opened one container, the smell confirmed my suspicion. The food had spoiled. "How long has this chicken salad been here?" I asked, my voice sharp with concern. Deborah looked flustered. "I do not know. My assistant manager usually handles that. Maybe a week." "A week." I felt my jaw tighten. "Chicken salad has a maximum safe storage time of 3 to 4 days under proper refrigeration. Given that your refrigerator is not maintaining safe temperatures, this should have been discarded much sooner." "Have you served any of this?" "I might have used some earlier in the week," she admitted. "But no one got sick." "That you know of," I corrected. Foodborne illness does not always manifest immediately, and not everyone reports it. This is a major violation. I continued through the kitchen, documenting everything with photos and detailed notes. By the time I finished, I had identified over 20 violations, ranging from minor infractions to several critical issues that posed immediate public health risks. Deborah watched me write up the report with increasing agitation. "You are doing this because you are mad about the pool situation. You are targeting me." I looked up from my clipboard. "Miss Thornton, every violation I have documented today is a factual, observable condition in your establishment. You can verify each one yourself. The refrigerator temperature is measurable. The spoiled food is visible and smells rotten. The lack of proper sanitation logs is evident. None of this has anything to do with your behavior toward me personally." "I want to file a complaint," she declared. "This is clearly biased. I want another inspector." "That is your right," I acknowledged. "You can request a follow-up inspection from a different inspector. However, That will not change the violations that exist right now. I am issuing you a citation that requires immediate correction of the critical violations, specifically the refrigerator temperature and the removal of spoiled food. You have 72 hours to have your refrigeration equipment serviced and brought into compliance. You will also need to discard all potentially hazardous foods that have been stored improperly. I handed her the multi-page report. The non-critical violations need to be addressed within 30 days. A follow-up inspection will be conducted to verify compliance. Failure to correct these issues will result in escalating consequences, up to and including temporary closure. Deborah took the papers with shaking hands, her face red with anger and humiliation. This is not over. I will make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are. You are free to tell anyone you like about this inspection, I said evenly. The report is public record. However, I would remind you that I am simply doing my job, which is to ensure public health and safety. Every inspector in our department would have cited these same violations. I left the cafe and sat in my car for a moment, documenting the inspection in my official mobile database. I felt no satisfaction in what had just happened. I had not known Deborah owned that cafe, and I certainly had not gone in hoping to find violations. But the violations had been there, clear and undeniable, and my responsibility was to the public health, not to spare someone's feelings. Over the next few days, I heard through the neighborhood grapevine that Deborah was indeed telling everyone who would listen that I had maliciously targeted her business. She claimed I had fabricated violations, that I was abusing my power, and that she was being persecuted for standing up for community values. What she did not know was that I had followed procedure exactly, and my supervisor had already reviewed my report and confirmed that everything was documented properly. When Deborah had called my office to file a formal complaint, she had been told that another inspector would conduct the follow-up inspection, but that my initial report stood as accurate. The second inspection happened a week later. I was not involved, but I received a copy of the report through our internal system. The follow-up inspector had found that Deborah had addressed some of the critical violations, but had actually discovered 2 additional problems that I had not caught, including evidence of rodent activity in the storage area. The cafe was given an extended timeline to address all issues, with the warning that failure to comply would result in immediate closure. Meanwhile, back in the neighborhood, Deborah's campaign against me intensified. She started posting in the community Facebook group, never mentioning me by name but making thinly veiled references to certain selfish homeowners who refused to contribute to the community and who abused their professional positions to target innocent small business owners. Some residents seemed to buy into her narrative, but others started asking questions. One neighbor, a retired lawyer named Patricia who lived across the street from me, publicly called out Deborah's behavior on the Facebook group. "I think we all know who you are talking about, Deborah," Patricia wrote. "And I think it is time someone said publicly that your behavior towards Zachary has been inappropriate from the start. He has no obligation to share his private pool, and continuing to harass him about it reflects poorly on you and the HOA. As for the health inspection, those are public records. Anyone can request a copy and see exactly what was found. If you are running a food establishment, you need to meet health codes. That is not persecution. That is public safety." The post sparked a heated debate in the group, with the neighborhood essentially dividing into 2 camps. Most people, I was relieved to see, sided with reason and basic property rights. But Deborah had her supporters, mostly people who apparently believed that community living meant surrendering individual property rights for the collective good. The HOA president, Michael Chen, reached out to me privately. "Zachary, I want you to know that the board does not support Deborah's behavior regarding your pool. She has been reprimanded for attempting to use her HOA position for personal benefit. However, I cannot force her to resign as she was elected by the membership. I just wanted you to know where the board stands." "I appreciate that, Michael," I told him. "I have been documenting everything just in case this escalates further." "Good thinking," he said. "I hate to say this, but I would not put it past Deborah to try something else. She does not take being told no very well." Michael's warning proved prescient. 2 weeks after the health inspection, I came home from work to find a notice on my door from the City Code Enforcement Department. Someone had filed a complaint claiming that my pool did not have proper safety fencing and that it violated city regulations. I walked around my pool area, examining the fence that had been professionally installed and inspected when I built the pool. It was 6 feet tall, had a self-closing, self-latching gate, and met every single requirement in the city code. I had the original inspection approval documentation in my files. The next day, a city code enforcement officer came out to inspect. He spent about 10 minutes examining the fence, checking his measurements and reviewing the original permit documents I provided. "Mr. Daniels, I do not know who filed this complaint, but your fence is completely compliant," he said. "It actually exceeds the minimum requirements." This was a waste of both of our time. "Can you tell me who filed the complaint?" I asked, though I already knew. He checked his paperwork. "The complaint was filed anonymously, but it came through an email address associated with the Sunset Meadows HOA. That is all I can tell you." After he left, I made copies of his report clearing my pool fence and added them to my growing file of documentation. I was beginning to realize that Deborah was not going to stop. In her mind, I had humiliated her twice, first by refusing her access to my pool and involving the police, and then by citing her cafe for health violations. The fact that I had been completely within my rights both times did not matter to her. She wanted revenge. The harassment continued in small ways. My newspaper started disappearing from my driveway. My garbage cans were repeatedly knocked over the night before trash pickup. Someone left a nasty note on my car windshield calling me a selfish jerk who thinks he is better than everyone. I installed security cameras around my property, capturing everything. The cameras revealed that it was not actually Deborah herself doing these things, but her teenage son, presumably at her direction. I now had video evidence of him stealing my newspaper, kicking over my garbage cans, and leaving the note on my car. I contacted the police and filed a report, providing the video evidence. Officer Martinez, who had responded to the original pool incident, came out to take my statement. "This woman really has it out for you," he observed, reviewing the footage. "We will have a conversation with her and her son about this. Petty harassment like this can escalate if it is not addressed." The police visit apparently rattled Deborah enough that the petty harassment stopped. But I knew she was not done. She was just regrouping and planning her next move. That move came in the form of another emergency HOA board meeting, this time with Deborah bringing a lawyer. I received the notice a week in advance. The meeting agenda listed discussion and potential action regarding homeowner violations of community standards and hostile behavior toward board members. I called Patricia, the retired lawyer, and asked if she would attend the meeting with me. "I have a feeling this is going to be Deborah's attempt to use the HOA to retaliate," I explained. "Absolutely," Patricia agreed. and I am bringing my own copies of the HOA bylaws and some relevant case law. If Deborah wants to play legal games, she is going to find out that I actually know what I am doing. The meeting was held in the community clubhouse on a Thursday evening. When I arrived with Patricia, the room was already half full of neighbors, many of whom had clearly been recruited by Deborah to support whatever she had planned. Deborah sat at the board table with her lawyer, a young man in an expensive suit who looked like he had graduated from law school about 15 minutes ago. Michael Chen called the meeting to order and immediately looked uncomfortable. Before we begin, I want to state for the record that this meeting was called at the insistence of board member Deborah Thornton. The board as a whole has some concerns about the agenda items, but we are obligated to hear the matter. Deborah stood up, smoothing her lavender pantsuit. Thank you, Michael. I have brought these matters to the board's attention because we have a homeowner who has repeatedly violated the spirit of our community, created a hostile environment, and used his professional position to harass and intimidate board members. I kept my expression neutral as she continued her speech, which was essentially a recitation of every grievance she had nursed over the past month. She claimed I was uncooperative with community initiatives, that I had refused reasonable requests for shared amenities, that I had filed false police reports, and that I had conducted a retaliatory health inspection on her business. When she finished, her lawyer stood up. The HOA board has the authority and responsibility to maintain community standards and harmony, he said in what I assumed he thought was an authoritative voice. My client is requesting that the board take action to address Mr. Daniels' behavior, including potential fines for creating a hostile environment and refusing to participate in community activities. Michael looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Mr. Daniels, would you like to respond? I stood, with Patricia beside me. Thank you, Michael. I will keep this brief. Every allegation Miss Thornton has made is either a distortion of facts or an outright falsehood. I did not refuse reasonable requests. I declined to allow her to use my private property, which is my right. I did not file false police reports. I called the police when Miss Thornton attempted to trespass, which is appropriate, and I certainly did not conduct a retaliatory health inspection. I was assigned to inspect Miss Thornton's cafe as part of my regular duties, and I documented factual violations of health codes. Everything I documented was verified by a follow-up inspection conducted by a different inspector. Patricia stepped forward. I am Patricia Malone, and I am a retired attorney with 30 years of experience in property law. I am here tonight to make it absolutely clear that the HOA has no legal authority to punish a homeowner for exercising their property rights or for performing their professional duties. Any attempt to fine Mr. Daniels or otherwise sanction him for the matters Miss Thornton has described would be a clear violation of his rights and would expose this HOA to significant legal liability. She placed a document on the table in front of the board. This is a summary of relevant case law regarding HOA authority and homeowner rights. I suggest the board review it carefully before taking any action. Deborah's lawyer looked less confident now. The HOA has broad authority to maintain community standards. Within the bounds of the law, yes, Patricia agreed. But you cannot fine someone for refusing to share private property. You cannot punish them for filing legitimate police reports. And you certainly cannot retaliate against them for doing their job in a professional capacity. If this board votes to take action against Mr. Daniels tonight, I guarantee we will be in court by Monday morning. The room had gone very quiet. Michael exchanged glances with the other board members, then cleared his throat. I think the board needs to discuss this matter in executive session. We are going to take a 15-minute recess." The board members filed into a side room. Deborah and her lawyer followed. When they emerged 20 minutes later, Michael looked relieved. "After careful consideration and legal consultation, the board has decided that no action will be taken against Mr. Daniels at this time," he announced. "The allegations do not constitute violations of HOA rules or community standards. This matter is closed." Deborah's face turned scarlet. "You cannot be serious. He has violated every principle of community living." "Deborah," Michael said firmly, "enough. You have pursued this vendetta long enough. The board is done enabling it. Mr. Daniels has done nothing wrong, and this HOA will not be used as a tool for personal revenge." I watched as Deborah looked around the room, apparently hoping for support from the neighbors she had recruited. But the mood had shifted. People were uncomfortable, whispering to each other. Even her supporters seemed to realize that this had gone too far. "This is unacceptable," Deborah declared. "I will take this to a full membership vote. We will see what the community really thinks." "You are welcome to do that," Michael replied. "But you would need to collect signatures from 20% of the homeowners to call a special election. And even then, the outcome would not change the legal reality. You cannot vote away someone's property rights." Deborah grabbed her purse and stormed out of the meeting, her lawyer hurrying after her. The tension in the room dissipated as people began talking quietly. Several neighbors came up to me afterward to apologize for Deborah's behavior and to express support. I drove home that night feeling cautiously optimistic that maybe, finally, this situation was over. Patricia followed me back to my house, and we sat on my back patio, looking out at the pool that had caused so much trouble. "Thank you for your help tonight," I said. "I do not think the board would have been as definitive without you there." "Happy to help," Patricia replied. "But I have to tell you, Zachary, I do not think Deborah is done. She is the type who cannot let go of a grudge. Keep those cameras running and keep documenting everything." Patricia's instincts were right. The next phase of Deborah's campaign came from an unexpected angle. 3 days after the HOA meeting, I received a letter at work from a law firm representing Deborah Thornton. The letter claimed that I had conducted a biased and unprofessional health inspection, that I had caused significant financial harm to her business, and that she was considering filing a lawsuit for damages related to lost revenue and reputational harm. The letter was clearly meant to intimidate me, but it actually made me laugh. I forwarded it to my supervisor and to the county's legal department. Within 2 days, the county attorney's office sent a response to Deborah's lawyer. The letter was a masterpiece of legal pushback, essentially stating that health inspectors conducting duties within their official capacity are protected from personal liability, that all violations documented in my report had been verified by subsequent inspection, and that any lawsuit filed would be frivolous and potentially subject to sanctions. That apparently scared off Deborah's lawyer, because I never heard from him again. But the letter had an unintended consequence. Because it had threatened a county employee for performing official duties, it triggered an internal review of Deborah's cafe. The county became very interested in ensuring that there had been no irregularities in the inspection process. As part of that review, the health department sent out another inspector to conduct a surprise inspection of Deborah's delights. This was not a routine inspection, but a detailed investigation to verify compliance with the previous citations. I was not involved in this inspection, but I received the report afterward. The results were damning. Not only had Deborah failed to fully address many of the original violations, but the new inspection found evidence of continued health code violations, including improper food storage, inadequate employee training, and the persistent rodent problem that had been identified in the follow-up inspection weeks earlier. Based on these findings, the health department issued an order of immediate closure. Deborah's Delights was shut down pending a complete remediation of all violations, documentation of pest control measures, and mandatory food safety training for all employees including the owner. The closure made the local news. A reporter from the Scottsdale newspaper did a story about the cafe being shut down for health code violations, and while the article did not mention me by name, it included details about the failed inspections and the serious nature of the violations. The article also noted that the owner had attempted to dispute the findings, but that subsequent inspections had confirmed and even expanded upon the original violations. I knew that Deborah would blame me for this, even though I had nothing to do with the subsequent inspections or the closure order. Sure enough, 2 days after the closure, I came home to find graffiti spray painted across my garage door. The message read, "Pool Nazi ruins small business," in bright red paint. This time I did not hesitate. I called the police immediately and filed a vandalism report. Officer Martinez came out again, and I could see he was frustrated by the ongoing situation. "This is getting out of hand," he said, photographing the graffiti. "We need to put a stop to this. Do your cameras show who did this?" I pulled up the footage on my phone and showed him. It was Deborah herself this time, at 2 in the morning, wearing dark clothing and a baseball cap, spray painting my garage door. The video was crystal clear, showing her face as she occasionally looked around to make sure no one was watching. Officer Martinez sighed. "That is clear evidence. I am going to have to bring her in for vandalism charges. Given the pattern of harassment and the fact that we have warned her multiple times, the district attorney will likely want to prosecute." "I do not enjoy the idea of having a neighbor arrested," I admitted, "but this has to stop. She is escalating." "Agreed," Officer Martinez said. "At this point, it is not just about you anymore. This is criminal behavior that needs to be addressed before someone gets hurt." Later that day, police officers went to Deborah's house and arrested her for criminal vandalism. She was taken to the police station, processed, and released on her own recognizance with a court date set for the following month. The neighborhood watched with a mixture of shock and satisfaction as Deborah was escorted to a police car in handcuffs. The arrest seemed to break something in Deborah's crusade. For the first time in weeks, my life returned to something resembling normal. There were no more harassment incidents, no more HOA complaints, no more threatening letters. Deborah kept to her house, emerging only occasionally and avoiding eye contact with everyone. The court case proceeded over the following weeks. I had to provide testimony about the pattern of harassment, and the video evidence of the graffiti was played in court. Deborah's lawyer tried to argue that she had been driven to desperate acts by what she perceived as persecution, but the judge was not sympathetic. "Miss Thornton, you have used your position in the HOA to harass a neighbor over a simple refusal to share private property," the judge stated during sentencing. "When that did not work, you filed false police reports, made baseless accusations, and ultimately resorted to criminal vandalism. The fact that you felt wronged does not justify this behavior. Your actions were premeditated and malicious." Deborah was sentenced to probation, community service, and restitution for the damage to my garage door. She was also ordered to have no contact with me, except as absolutely necessary for HOA business, and even then, only through written communication or with a third party present. The judge specifically noted that any further harassment would result in immediate jail time. Around the same time, Deborah's cafe situation was resolving, though not in her favor. The costs of remediating all the health code violations, combined with the lost revenue from being closed, were too much for the small business to absorb. Deborah's Delights closed permanently, with a notice posted on the door explaining that the owner had decided not to reopen. Some people in the neighborhood felt sorry for Deborah, claiming that she had been driven out of business by vindictive enforcement. But most people who knew the full story understood that she had brought it on herself by running a substandard operation, and then trying to blame the inspector who had documented the problems. There was one final chapter to this saga. At the next HOA board election, Deborah chose not to run for re-election as vice president. In fact, she and Gerald put their house on the market less than 2 months after her court case concluded. They moved out of the neighborhood in early fall, and I never saw Deborah again. The new family that moved into their house was friendly and normal. They introduced themselves to the neighbors, including me, and we had a pleasant conversation about the neighborhood. When their kids asked about my pool, the parents politely explained that it was private property and that they should not bother me about it. The kids accepted this without complaint, because they had parents who understood boundaries and taught their children to respect them. Patricia became a good friend over the following months. We would sit by my pool on weekend afternoons, talking about neighborhood politics and laughing about the absurdity of everything that had happened. She never once asked to use the pool without an explicit invitation, and when I did invite her, she always brought a bottle of wine and good conversation. Michael Chen remained HOA president, and under his leadership, the board became much more reasonable and focused on actual community issues rather than petty power plays. The Sunset Meadows community settled into a comfortable rhythm, with most residents realizing that respecting each other's property rights and personal space actually made for better neighbors. I never did share my pool with the general community, though I occasionally invited neighbors over for small gatherings. The pool remained my private retreat, a place where I could relax after long days of work without worrying about strangers in my backyard or liability issues if someone got hurt. Looking back on the entire situation, I found it remarkable how much conflict had emerged from such a simple concept: private property. Deborah had convinced herself that my refusal to share was somehow morally wrong, that community living required me to surrender my rights for the collective good. She had never stopped to consider that communities function best when everyone respects boundaries and understands that ownership means something. Her downfall had not been my doing, despite her claims. I had simply maintained my boundaries and performed my professional duties with integrity. The pool remained private because it was my right to keep it that way. The health inspection had found legitimate violations because they existed, not because I wanted revenge. And the legal consequences she faced were the result of her own choices to escalate the situation into harassment and vandalism. Sometimes I would float in my pool on quiet evenings, looking up at the Arizona sky turning purple and orange at sunset, and think about how a simple no had triggered such an avalanche of drama. I had learned that some people genuinely cannot accept being told no, that they will interpret any boundary as a personal attack, and that they will go to extraordinary lengths to get their way. But I had also learned that standing firm on reasonable boundaries, documenting everything, and staying professional even in the face of harassment could carry you through. The system, when properly used, actually worked. The police had taken my concerns seriously. The health department had backed up my professional judgment. The courts had recognized the pattern of harassment and held Deborah accountable. And in the end, I still had my pool, my home, and my peace of mind. Deborah, on the other hand, had lost her business, her position in the HOA, her reputation in the community, and ultimately her home. She had sacrificed all of that because she could not accept a simple, reasonable refusal. The story spread throughout the county health department, becoming something of a legend. My colleagues would sometimes joke about it, asking if I needed backup for routine inspections in case the business owner demanded access to my personal property. My supervisor used it as a teaching example about maintaining professional boundaries and documenting everything properly. For my part, I tried not to dwell on it too much. I had never wanted to be at the center of neighborhood drama or to see someone's life unravel because of their own poor choices. I had simply wanted to enjoy my home and do my job with integrity. The fact that both of those reasonable desires had collided with someone else's sense of entitlement was not my fault. As months passed and summer turned to fall, life in Sunset Meadows continued peacefully. The splash pad in the common area got upgraded with HOA funds, providing better amenities for families who wanted communal swimming options. Some residents installed their own pools, and none of them faced pressure to share because the precedent had been firmly established. Private property is private. I continued my work as a health inspector, conducting dozens of inspections every month. Most businesses were compliant or had only minor violations that were quickly corrected. The owners understood that inspectors were not the enemy, but rather partners in ensuring public safety. Occasionally, I would encounter someone defensive or difficult, but nothing ever came close to the level of hostility and retaliation that Deborah had displayed. The experience had taught me valuable lessons about human nature, about the importance of documentation and procedure, and about the strange ways that people's lives could become entangled over the simplest disagreements. It had also reinforced my belief that maintaining professional integrity, even when it was personally uncomfortable, was always the right choice. I never regretted refusing Deborah access to my pool. It had been my right to refuse, and exercising that right had not made me selfish or unreasonable. I never regretted conducting an honest health inspection of her cafe. It had been my job to document what I found, and those violations had put public health at risk. And I never regretted pressing charges when the harassment escalated to vandalism. Allowing such behavior to continue unchecked would have only encouraged further escalation. In the end, the entire saga was a reminder that standing up for yourself, even against someone who uses their position or social pressure to intimidate you, is not only possible but necessary. Deborah had counted on me backing down, on social pressure making me cave, on her HOA position giving her leverage. She had been wrong on all counts. My pool continued to serve its intended purpose, a private oasis where I could relax and unwind. I spent many peaceful hours there, sometimes alone with a book, sometimes with friends who respected the privilege of being invited. The water sparkled in the Arizona sun, the filter hummed quietly, and the stress of work and life melted away. And if sometimes I thought about that day when Deborah had shown up with her family in swimsuits, demanding access like it was her right, I would smile and appreciate the peaceful outcome even more. The battle had been unnecessary, created entirely by one person's refusal to accept a reasonable boundary. But it had ended appropriately, with respect for property rights and accountability for wrongdoing. Life went on in the Sunset Meadows community, better and more harmonious without Deborah's presence. The HOA functioned more smoothly. Neighbors got along without artificial drama. And I continued to enjoy my home, my pool, and my peace of mind, knowing that I had done everything right even when someone had tried so hard to make me the villain. The Arizona sun continued to shine, the pool water continued to cool, and life in Scottsdale, Arizona rolled on in the easy, comfortable way it was meant to. And that, really, was the best possible ending to a story that never should have happened in the first place.